Hey there guys, Music Fan here again. Continuing the U2 discography review with an album review of U2's 8th studio album, 1993's Zooropa, of course released in 1993. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into this review. So this album, Zooropa, is an album that really has U2 continuing even further into the experimentation that they had begun with Achtung Baby. Of course, Achtung Baby being the album that really was the album that really shook their mold, that really transitioned U2 from being this very overtly serious rock band, and really transitioning them from being that into a whole different band with a whole different style, and really the technological revolutions of Achtung Baby really helped U2 kind of break away from that from that simple rock format role that they had been pigeonholed, or rather they found themselves in during the late 80s, and kind of helping them to break away from that particular constraint, that public perception that U2 was this really serious rock band. And so instead U2 really headed into this particular album, which ironically enough was originally made to be just an EP. They headed into this album a lot more confidently and a lot more reassured than the sessions for Achtung Baby, which those sessions were filled with tension and filled with a lot of creative differences, which really marred the sessions of Achtung Baby. This time around, the band was a lot more comfortable in experimenting with electronic European textures. They were much more comfortable in experimenting with a club sound, much more in this album than they were with Achtung Baby, and it really shows with songs like "Daddy's Gonna Pay with Your Crashed Car," songs like "Some Days Are Better Than Others," and songs like "Lemon," and songs like "Babyface," which really deepens the band's fondness for hip hop and club culture in this particular album, way more than Achtung Baby. This album, as I've said before, originally was supposed to have been like a teaser EP before the band went out on the road for their European leg of their Zoo TV tour, and eventually it transitioned into being a full-fledged album released within the year of 93. And to really kind of go back into Zoo TV tour, this whole album is simply just inspired by Zoo TV. Zoo TV, of course, I'll leave a link, a wiki article on the link in the description box below, kind of to offering a more detailed explanation of Zoo TV and what it is. But to put it in a nutshell, Zoo TV, like Achtung Baby in of itself, was a tour that really shattered U2's away from that earnest, straightforward stage set that they had mastered around the 10 years of the 1980s, and really was a tour that really broke U2 into a much bigger stadium status than ever before. The Zoo TV was also, especially at the time, maybe even now, in this day and age of 2015, maybe even the tour, probably U2's most ambitious tour to date, if not ever, in their entire career as a touring band. Really, Zoo TV was a super ambitious tour that was a far more elaborate affair than just a simple rock band format. You had multiple giant TV screens all around the stage. You had Bono donning a lot of different costume personas, from The Fly, which is an egotistical rock star, the Mirrorball Man, which is supposed to have been a parody of TV evangelists, and Mr. Mephisto, who was a parody of the devil. And really, this tour really kind of presented U2 in a much more different light, in a much more ambitious zone than what people have been used to seeing of U2 in the past. And these technological advances in U2's tour definitely find find their inspiration straight into this album, into Zooropa. If you listen to the various tracks off this album, you can see, rather you can hear various influences from Zoo TV, and see that the technological advances of Zoo TV just seep into the band's music and seep into the songs of this album. Again, I think of tracks like the title track, the opener of this album. Really one of their most genius, brilliant compositions that they have ever made. Has this kind of three-part movement. At the beginning of this track, you start with this very heavy collage of samples and almost reminds you of Zoo TV in a way, the technological atmosphere of Zoo TV, and really with kind of having this really cool bass line part in the middle, and this transition into a really cool band thing of where Edge kind of uses this very weirdly distorted, almost spacey guitar tone with as the beginning part of this track segue into the middle, and then the end is just brilliant, breaking into the band moment. Another reminder of me of Zoo TV would be Daddy's Gonna Pay for Your Crashed Car. Really, that intro collage reminds me of something that U2 would do with the TV screens, with the satellite feedback and satellite manipulation. And this track especially is probably one of the most danciest and most club-orientated tracks. And lyrically, the song gets a lot of different meanings on here. It's taken a religious meaning, it's taken a more political meaning. But either way, this song is just straight awesome. Daddy's Gonna Pay for Your Crashed Car is one of those awesome tracks that works as an experiment. Like really, these songs have a much more experimental nature to them than anything off of Achtung Baby. Let alone those songs are more experimental than anything from their 80s catalog. You also have tracks like Lemon, which really has a little bit of a disco vibe, but instead of being a disco vibe in the vein of Donna Summer or late 70s, this is more of a disco vibe in terms of a European sound, more or less. This track really is a unique track in U2's catalog, and I also think of tracks like The First Time as well, which really is one of the most intimate songs U2 has ever produced, and is a track that is a more poetic moment in an album otherwise full of just heavy electronic experimentation and just lights and just a lot of those different textures. And really this track really stands out in being a track about, it's another interpretation of the story of the prodigal son with this particular track, and musically is a little more minimal than the other tracks off the album, being just these very gorgeous piano keys going in this particular track, and then as the track keeps progressing, the synth part I think that Brian Eno plays kind of gets louder and louder and more prominent, and it's a really emotional stopgap in an album that otherwise really takes a bigger European aesthetic in its sound than U2 albums of the past, especially Achtung Baby. And other times I think of tracks like Stay Far Away So Close, which is such a super amazing track. It's a track on this LP that really kind of gives off, like, it's probably their most straightforward rock song in their let alone on this particular album. And the lyrics here are pretty stark, and at the same time very beautiful. It's like dressed up like a car crash. Your wheels are turning, but you're upside down. What other lyrics I'm thinking about? It's quiet, but there's no one around. Just the band and the clatter as an angel hits the ground. Pretty heavy stuff. But really, the unique part of this album really kind of comes off at the end, really, with the final track, The Wanderer, starring Johnny Cash. And it's a different thing with this track because Johnny Cash's haggard old voice really juxtaposes the more experimental nature of this last track, which in of itself, the sound of the music on The Wanderer almost gives a very walking through the desert vibe off this particular track. At least I get it off this particular track. And the way Johnny's voice really juxtaposes against the electronic nature of this particular track is just simply top notch, and is amongst one of Johnny Cash's, really heartfelt and really earnest performance without him really kind of belting out or anything. It's just him singing Bono's lyrics, and this track is really presents a really good fascinating ending to an album that is otherwise full of just postmodern experimentation, a lot of club culture, electronics here and there. And really, if I would give a rating to this album, I wouldn't necessarily put this as amongst one of my favorites in their catalog. It's definitely not amongst my top 5. But really, this album is unique in the sense that U2 really went into this album, first EP then album, really without the idea of an audience in mind. They didn't create this album for a specific audience. Rather, they created this album to further develop their experimental nature, that their newfound experimental ethic that they had worked themselves in with Achtung Baby, and develop even further into the European experimentation, even further and deeper than they had with the last album. And really, this album, again, is not one of my favorites, but it's an album that I find to be a very unique entry into U2's catalog. Even though it is not technically a conceptual album, the lyrics, when you take all the sounds and when you take all the lyrics off the whole album, it almost speaks as if it's a unified story, even though the band had no intentions of making anything conceptual. But it still is a unique album. It's an album that finds U2 becoming more comfortable with technology and becoming more comfortable with experimentation. And really, if I can give this album, I'd probably give it like around a 3.5. Really, an important one in the sense that it continues their newfound experimentation and really coming out with solid songs that are really great. Really, I feel that the only misstep in this album has to be rather the second track, Babyface. Is possibly my least favorite track on this album. I love the minimal nature of this track. I love how it's more hip-hop orientated, and lyrically it reminds me of the lyrical subject matter in even better than The Real Thing. But as far as it being a track, it's a track that doesn't gravitate well with me. It just doesn't. I mean, if you're a fan of this track, good for you, great. But for me, it's pretty much the only letdown for this album, at least for me personally. But overall, Zooropa gets like a 3.5, maybe around a 4, between those two different gradings. So yeah, that's pretty much my opinions, my thoughts on Zooropa. Leave a comment in the comment section below. What do you think of this album? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you love it? Do you not love it? Why or why not? And leave your comments, and I will see you guys next time. U2, Zooropa, and this has been a review. I will see you guys next time. Take care.